What up, guys? It's Dom, and welcome back to another movie review. Today we're going over Warcraft. Warcraft, released in 2016, written and directed by Duncan Jones. As an orc horde invades the planet Azeroth using a magic portal, a few human heroes and dissenting orcs must attempt to stop the true evil behind this war. Let's get right into the 10 essential aspects of a movie. The first essential aspect is plot. So me personally, I did kind of enjoy this plot. I thought that it was good for the world it was set in. And I have played World of Warcraft years ago, and I barely played it. It just wasn't my cup of tea. But in general, the world is interesting. I definitely love... I was rooting for the orcs the whole time, I'm not going to lie, even though they were technically the bad guys. But I was rooting for the orcs just because I thought that the whole clan that they had and the way that they look, it was just really, really cool. And I don't know why I was just rooting for them the whole time. But in general, just the whole war going on in this movie was really, really good. The traders, the battles, the concept behind both sides, I thought it was very interesting. So I thought they did a really good job with the plot. There were some plot holes here and there. Like, the ending was a cliffhanger, and they said that they're making another movie, but who knows? And there are just some other points throughout the movie that I didn't really understand, or I feel like they could have shown it a little better. But for the most part, I thought this was a pretty solid plot. The second essential aspect is attraction. So I think for the most part, this movie was very entertaining. I feel like there were some parts that I was lost on because I don't really know the WoW universe and characters. And that's one thing that they didn't do in this. They didn't do a good job of really having character growth in this, because they expected everyone that is watching this to know WoW and know what the characters are, who they are, and their whole backstories. I didn't. So I was kind of lost on a lot of the points there, which does definitely pull me out. But for the actual entertaining action scenes in this movie, they were good. I was definitely invested. I loved the fight scenes. I loved the battles. I loved the chemistry between some of the characters. It was all very entertaining. But I feel like they still should have, broadened their audience just to not only WoW players, but people that want to maybe get into the universe without having to previously play the game. The third essential aspect is theme. I'm not gonna lie, I have no idea what the theme is. I could not think of one. I spent so long trying to figure it out. So let's just move on. The fourth essential aspect is dialogue. Now this part is so interesting. I loved the dialogue in this movie because the orcs speak their own language, and obviously when they're talking to each other, we hear it as English. And I just thought, like, okay, yeah, maybe both sides speak English, or it's just they want us to understand what they're saying, so instead of subtitles they just translated it. I was like, okay, that's pretty cool, whatever. But then there was a scene where there was a half orc, half human, I believe, and she was translating between the two sides. And at first it was the humans were speaking in English, the orcs were speaking in their language that no one even understood, but she was translating. And then it flipped where we can understand the orcs in English, but we don't understand the humans. And then there was subtitles on this, and it said orcs speaking in their language when we could understand the humans. But then when it flipped, it actually said humans speaking in common, which I thought was really interesting because, okay, now we're at the orcs' point of view where what English is just a bunch of gibberish, but we understand everything that the orcs are saying. So I thought that was really, really cool and a good attention to detail to make it not just you have to have subtitles on to understand what's going on. I absolutely loved that. I thought that once that scene came in, it made me love the movie so much more because I saw how much effort and attention to detail they put into those kinds of scenes. The fifth essential aspect is acting. So a lot of this movie was voice acting, and everyone did a good job. There wasn't really any discrepancies that sounded weird. But the main actor, Travis Fimmel, who played Lothar, he did a really good job investing in the character, expressing his emotions, really taking the character a hold and being Lothar. So I thought he did a really good job, and his acting really made me get invested in that character, which with no character development really throughout the whole movie, it's good to at least get invested in a character, if at all. Because if I went the whole movie without really being invested in any character, it would have just blown by. I would have been like, okay. But Yeah, he did a really good job. Lothar was a really, really cool character to follow. He was definitely the most savage out of all of the humans, and that was a really good part of the movie. But everyone else did an okay job. I mean, the orcs, it was just voice dialogue and it was just voice actors, but they still did a good job with that grunty orc voice. Everyone did, so that was a good job. And all the humans, they acted medieval, so I guess it worked. The sixth essential aspect is cinematography. So I got it handed to them. The CGI looked great in this movie. It actually looked really realistic. I thought it was really good. The one part that I am bummed out about cinematography is there was a lot of emotional scenes, and honestly, because of the little to no character development, I didn't really feel emotional during any of the scenes. Like any time that something tragic happened, it just kind of felt like another scene to me. So that's one thing that bummed me out. I really wish they invested more time into showing who these characters are and giving them a good backstory so that viewers like me that never played the game would still be invested and would feel bad for these characters. The seventh essential aspect is editing. So Warcraft is 2 hours and 3 minutes long, and honestly, it feels a little long. It had a great story to continue through and pace through, and the pacing was actually pretty good for what it was. I just feel like they could have gotten there a lot quicker, maybe like an hour 40, an hour 45 minutes, and it would have been perfect because it would have still been enough time to get to the point and get to the ending with great pacing, except you could really cut out all of that stuff that didn't really need to be in there. Felt like there was a lot of filler content that it made sense and it did help with the story, but not enough to really need it. The eighth essential aspect is soundtrack. So the music wasn't anything too special, but it did definitely fit. It went, especially during the battle scenes, the music really did pump you up to want to see this battle. So that I'll have to give it to it, but otherwise, it wasn't too special. The ninth essential aspect is directing. So the director of this movie is Duncan Jones, and it was his job to take these previous 8 essential aspects, put them together to make a movie that's worth watching. And I think the movie is definitely worth watching. If you're a fan of WoW, you'll definitely want to watch this movie. But if you're not, I still feel like it's worth watching. It has an interesting story, some interesting characters. It's a good watch. Maybe not a rewatch 1,000 times unless you're a fan of WoW, but it's still a good movie. I definitely would suggest it. And he's previously directed 2 movies, and they are Moon and Source Code. Now, I don't know how to judge him as a director. I haven't watched these 2 movies, but this one was pretty good. If they make a sequel, I feel like he definitely should be the guy to do it. I just still feel like he should add some more character development. But overall, this was a good movie. He did a good job. And the 10th essential aspect is time. Will Warcraft stand the test of time? I feel like it does, depending on the person you are. If you are a diehard fan of WoW, you're going to love this movie just because it's characters you've played the game, you know the story behind it, it's interesting. Because this movie does take place before the game, so it's almost like a prequel to the game that they've played. So you will definitely enjoy it, and it will definitely stand the test of time for you. For someone like me that hasn't played it, I feel like it won't really stand the test of time, but it's definitely one that maybe I'll watch in a few years or maybe even a decade and just be like, oh yeah, this movie was pretty good, but it's going to be forgettable for the most part. Now, on to the reviews. These reviews were on 2 opposite sides of the spectrum. So Rotten Tomatoes critics gave it a 29%, Rotten Tomatoes audience gave it a 76%, and IMDb gave it a 67%. Now, I understand why critics put it so low because it's really targeted towards WoW players, but no movie this movie's pretty good. So there's no reason that it should be that low, so let's just get 29% out of here. And 76% is definitely from players that enjoy the movie, audience members that played the game that enjoy the movie. Because that is a little too high for this movie. I feel like it just doesn't need to be that high, even though there is some really good points. The character development is such an important part of the plot, and they really sold on that. So it also does not need to be 76, so get that out of there as well. And 67, I still feel like that's a little high. I would give it low 60s, maybe high 50s, but it is still a good movie. It's definitely a movie that I could see myself watching again in a few years, but nothing that I'm going to be writing home about and just making sure that I have all of my friends watch it. It's not that kind of movie. And finally, the rankings. Where will Warcraft rank in its year, decade, and in all time? Let's find out, starting with 2016. It's going to be third. It's going to be right below X-Men Apocalypse. To me, this isn't really in the conversation. X-Men Apocalypse is a really, really good movie, and the characters actually get developed in that movie. You see these characters developing, you start actually caring about them. I feel like in Warcraft, I didn't really do that. I didn't really have any characters. Lothar was good, but I didn't have any other characters that I really, if something happened, I would care. Like, I cared in Apocalypse when stuff happened. And obviously Apocalypse isn't even one of the best Marvel movies or X-Men movies, but it's still a really good movie. I just feel like the distance between these two movies is nowhere close. And in the 2010s, it's going to be 10th, above Kick-Ass and below X-Men Apocalypse. I'm not going to say why it's below X-Men Apocalypse because it's for the same reasons, but it's above Kick-Ass because I feel like both are really good action. They have really interesting stories and plots. I just feel like Kick-Ass has a little more cringiness to it than Warcraft does. Warcraft definitely has some really interesting characters, and it's a very serious movie. I mean, it's not really serious, but it's more serious than Kick-Ass. Kick-Ass is supposed to be comedic, funny, just superheroes that are kind of cringy, and especially the villains. But I just think Warcraft, especially with the great CGI it has, it looks really good. The world is much more interesting than Kick-Ass. I just think it's a better movie overall. So that's why it's above it. And in all time, it's going to be 17th, above Kick-Ass and below X-Men. I'm obviously not going to talk about why it's above Kick-Ass again because I just did. But it's below X-Men. Just, I don't know. I would really prefer to watch X-Men than this movie again. Maybe that's just the Marvel nerd in me. I love watching Marvel, so maybe I guess I'm biased. But I don't know. I just feel like the X-Men is just a movie that's done better. I feel like the characters are good. The dialogue's really good. It's also the opening part of X-Men, so I'm going to say this one more time. The character development's great because they have to develop those characters. It's the first time they're on screen. And Warcraft, of course, did not. And I don't know. I mean, the really only thing that Warcraft has on X-Men is the dialogue because of that really interesting bilingual orc conversation that it had throughout the entire movie. So, I don't know. I just think X-Men beats it out, even if it's by a little bit. It's not as big of a gap as X-Men Apocalypse, but it's a gap nonetheless. That's all I have for Warcraft. If you guys enjoyed this review, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and definitely make sure to comment what movie you want me to review next. I hope you guys have an amazing day. Peace out.